again, everybody. Welcome back to Grid. We're a music and audio post-production house here in Singapore. My name is Edric. I'm the Director of Music Production here at Grid. Today, we're going to look at recording electric guitars in a way that makes the editing process a lot easier later on. And while we're at it, we're going to look at reamping the electric guitar tracks as well. Today, we have Simon here in the studio. He's the guitarist for two bands here in Singapore, Signation and Alpha. Simon is also a guitar instructor. In charge of the recording, we have Dino, our head recording engineer. Before we begin, let's go through the recording signal chain. From the electric guitar, we're going to go into the DI box. From the DI box through, we're going to go into Simon's pedal board, which is going to go into the amp head. The amp head is going to go into the speaker cabinet in the live room, which is then going to go into the mics, the preamp, and then the audio interface. From the XLR output of the DI box, we're going to go into a separate preamp, which is going to go straight into the audio interface. Today we're going to have Simon record two different types of guitar tracks, one clean and one with a distortion, and we're going to look at the tracks later on during the editing and reamping process. So let's begin. Okay, so here we have the tracks we recorded just now. We have the clean guitar track. And we have the distortion guitar track. Okay, and visually just looking at this in Pro Tools, you can see that there's a huge difference in terms of the waveform between the clean guitar track and the distortion guitar track. You can see that on the clean guitar track, the waveform transients are all very clearly distinguishable in the grid. So this makes the editing process really straightforward. Like you can just see the transients, you can tell that okay, you can tell like there's this note here that's a little bit early. So you can just take that. You can switch on tab to transient for Pro Tools. You can tap to the transients here because these are clean guitar tracks. You can cut it out and then you can just physically move the transient onto the grid if you need to. Okay, but if you look at the distortion guitar tracks, as we have at the bottom, okay, the transients on the distortion guitar tracks are not very clear. They're not very defined. And if you were to take this and start editing them inside Pro Tools, chances are you'd probably get a little bit more of a timing issue rather than fixing the timing problem. So you can see over here, even if we tap the transient inside Pro Tools, you can see that Pro Tools doesn't always land on the transient. Sometimes it lands before it, sometimes it lands right after it. And this is really where the advantage comes of recording the DI tracks for distortion guitars. So if you look at the DI track recorded above here, which is this one I've highlighted, you can see that because the DI tracks are completely clean guitars, they showcase all the transient information needed inside Pro Tools for editing. So what we can do is we can follow the transient information on the DI tracks and use that to edit the distortion guitars. Right, so I can come to the DI tracks, I can visually, let me just play one section. Okay, you can tell that this little part here is a little bit off time. So I can actually go in, look at the DI tracks, switch on, tap the transient. We can cut this one out. And I selected it on the DI tracks. All I need to do now is select the other two tracks as well. Cut it, shift it onto the grid. Go to this other section here where it's a little bit rushed. Right, this one here. So we can, same thing, switch on, tap the transient, select this entire section, select the distortion tracks, and then move it onto the grid again. Okay, and then after that, all you really need to do is to crossfade the tracks, just to clean up the edits. Okay, so that's where the big advantage comes when you're recording DI tracks for distortion electric guitars, is so that you'd be able to edit them cleanly and accurately later on, for post processing for the mixes. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is software reamping inside the DAW. Over here we have the guitar tracks recorded just now. Okay, so you can hear that we have a nice distortion tone recorded, but sometimes, later on during the mix, you realize that you actually need either a grittier tone, a tone with more bite, or just a completely different tone altogether for your guitars. So then we'd usually resort to reamping the guitar tracks, right? So over here we have the DI guitar tracks that we recorded just now. Okay, you can hear that on its own, it sounds very unappealing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go inside Pro Tools, we're going to go into your inserts. And for software reamping, you usually need some form of amp simulator inside your DAW, which is usually available in most DAWs these days. Today we're going to look at Kazrog. So there are a whole bunch of different softwares available. There's Kazrog, you have Guitar Rig from Native Instruments, you have Bias Effects, and there are many more out there which you guys can look at. We're going to load up Kazrog. The good thing about Kazrog is that it's got a separate plugin for its amplifier head and its speaker cabinet, so we can simulate both differently. So we're going to load up, this is the head, and then we're going to load up the cab. I'm just going to choose like a default, just to get things going. And then let's listen to that. Okay, and then obviously within your software, you can adjust all the different settings you need to. Okay, and sometimes you can even add this onto the original recording as well. Okay, and you can see from here that is the really big advantage of recording DI tracks for your electric guitars, because later on during the mix, you can come in, you can slap on different types of amp simulators and cabinet simulators to get different types of tones for electric guitars, and this can be done, without the guitarist needing to be in the studio all the time. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is hardware reamping. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the signal chain that we need to go through for hardware reamping. We have the audio interface, which is going to output signal to our reamping box, which is going to output signal to a new amplifier, a different amplifier we had from the previous recording. It's going to go to a different speaker cabinet, and then it's going to come in through the microphones and then back to the preamp and into the audio interface again. So the next thing you need to take note of is how to set up the tracks inside your DAW for hardware reamping. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to route the outputs of the DI track to a new line output from your audio interface. Okay, once that's done, you need to create audio tracks again for the recording from the microphones. Okay, so let's create tracks.
Still one. Still two.
Okay, and we can monitor them for recording. So let's play it back. Cool, let's stop there. Okay, so the recorded tone you just heard is from the recording we did just now with Simon, but we recorded the DI tracks, and now we're putting the same DI tracks through a different amplifier so that we can achieve a different tone for this project. Okay, so obviously you can go in and tweak all the other settings on this amplifier to your liking, depending on what you're looking for in the production. And you have the flexibility of using, various amplifiers you have in the studio through this reamping process. Hopefully after today's video, you understand the importance of recording the electric guitar DI tracks and also better understand the different methods of reamping. Today's tracks will be made available for download so that you guys can practice reamping as well as editing. As always, if you'd like to contact us, you can do so at gryd.studio. Thank you.